3 days after the fall of Zephyrian High Command, a small human shuttle approached the Galactic Council station. The vessel transmitted standard diplomatic codes and requested permission to dock with the massive structure that housed representatives. From hundreds of World's Council security reviewed the request with casual indifference. Humans had never caused problems during previous visits and were generally viewed as harmless primitives who posed no threat to galactic stability. Permission was granted without additional screening. Maya Chen piloted the shuttle through the docking procedures while maintaining perfect composure. She carried diplomatic credentials identifying her as a cultural exchange representative from Earth. The documents were genuine and had been prepared months earlier for this specific mission. Chen walked through the station's corridors carrying a simple metal briefcase that passed through every security scanner without triggering alarms. The contents were organic and posed no threat according to the automated systems that protected the council chambers. The Galactic Council was in session discussing the collapse of Zephyrian authority and the implications for galactic stability. Representatives from dozens of species debated whether humans should be censured for their violent response to Officer Kixathara's execution. Chancellor Mordeth of the Altarian Union had been trying to explain human psychology to his fellow council members. His warnings about human retaliation had proven accurate, but most species still did not understand what they were dealing with. "The humans are not like us," Mordeth said for the 10th time that day. "Their protective instincts toward their young override all other considerations, including their own survival. They will sacrifice everything to defend their children." Representative Zulkar of the hegemony dismissed such concerns with typical arrogance. His species had dominated their region of space for centuries and viewed human military capabilities as temporary anomalies that could be corrected. "They are primitives with stolen technology," Zulkar declared. "Once we understand their weapons, we can defeat them easily. A few orbital bombardments of their colonies will teach them proper respect for established authority." The debate continued while Chen made her way through the station's public areas. She had studied the layout extensively and knew exactly where she needed to go. The main council chamber was heavily guarded, but not against someone with legitimate access. Chen approached the visitors' gallery and presented her credentials to the guard stationed at the entrance. The Altarian security officer scanned her documents and found them in perfect order. Cultural exchange representatives were common and generally ignored. She took a seat in the back of the gallery and listened to the ongoing debate about human capabilities. Most council members seemed to view the recent events as temporary setbacks that could be reversed through proper application of force. The briefcase rested on her lap while she waited for the right moment to act. Inside was Officer Kixathara's head along with a data chip containing the complete recording of her trial and execution. The message would be delivered exactly as Admiral Thompson had planned. Representative Thoknar of the Trade Federation was explaining why economic sanctions against human colonies would force them to accept galactic authority. His species controlled much of the commercial shipping in their sector and believed they could starve humans into submission, cut off their supply lines, and they will beg for mercy within months, Thoknar said confidently. Humans are dependent on galactic trade networks and cannot survive in isolation. They will accept any terms we offer. Chen stood and began walking toward the main floor of the chamber. Several guards noticed her movement but took no action since she had proper credentials and posed no apparent threat. The briefcase remained closed and unremarkable. She reached the central speaking platform where council members addressed their colleagues during formal sessions. The platform was reserved for official representatives, but security had been relaxed due to the ongoing crisis in Zephyrian space. Chen placed the briefcase on the speaking platform and activated the opening mechanism. The metal case unlocked with a soft click that was barely audible above the ongoing debate. Then she stepped back and waited. The chamber fell silent as council members realized that something unusual was happening. Representative Zulkar was the first to approach the open briefcase and peer inside. His reaction was immediate and violent, as he stumbled backward with terror in his eyes. Inside the case, Officer Kixthara's severed head stared sightlessly at the assembled representatives. Her purple skin had turned gray in death, but her features were still recognizable to anyone who had known her. Beside the head lay a data chip marked with human text. Chancellor Mordeth reached the platform next and immediately understood what he was seeing. The humans had delivered their message directly to the heart of galactic government. They wanted every species to see what happened to those who harmed human children. "Security alert!" someone shouted as the chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives from dozens of species demanded immediate arrest of the human terrorist who had brought this horror into their sacred halls. But Chen made no effort to resist or escape. She stood calmly beside the briefcase while guards surrounded her with weapons drawn. Her diplomatic immunity protected her from immediate execution, but not from detention and questioning. The message had been delivered, and her part was complete. Representative Thoknar grabbed the data chip and inserted it into the chamber's main display system. The recording began playing immediately, showing Officer Kixthara's trial and execution in complete detail. Every word of her arrogant defense was heard by the assembled council. The chamber watched in stunned silence as the footage showed Kixthara dismissing Tommy Blake as a creature that deserved violent discipline. Her threats against other human children were heard by representatives whose own species had young to protect. When the execution scene played, several council members turned away in revulsion. But Mordeth forced himself to watch the entire recording while taking mental notes about human military capabilities and psychological warfare tactics. "This is barbarism," Representative Zulkar declared when the recording ended. "Civilized beings do not resort to public executions and terrorist attacks. The humans must be punished for this violation of galactic law." Chen finally spoke, addressing the council directly for the first time since entering the chamber. Her voice was calm and professional despite being surrounded by armed guards who wanted her dead. "Officer Kixthara struck an 8-year-old human child with an energy weapon," she said clearly. "When we sought justice through proper channels, we were told that the assault was justified discipline. So we administered our own justice." The simple statement sent ripples of fear through the assembled representatives. Chen was not apologizing or making excuses for human actions. She was explaining why those actions had been necessary and implying that more would follow if needed. Chancellor Mordeth stepped forward to address his fellow council members before the situation could escalate further. He had studied human history extensively and understood the significance of what they had just witnessed. "The humans have sent us a message that transcends species and political boundaries," Mordeth announced. "They are willing to destroy galactic civilization rather than allow their children to be harmed. We must decide how to respond." Representative Felmoth of the Pacifist Coalition called for immediate military action against all human colonies. Her species had suffered under human economic sanctions and wanted revenge for their lost profits and influence. But Mordeth activated the chamber's holographic display system and began showing images from human military history. Battlefields from Earth's ancient wars appeared above the speaking platform while he explained what they represented. These beings evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them. Mordeth said, as images of Earth's predators and natural disasters filled the chamber. They survived by becoming more dangerous than their environment. The presentation continued with footage from the recent destruction of the Zephyrian First Fleet. 11 heavy cruisers had been erased from existence by human weapons that defied understanding. The technological gap was wider than anyone had realized. They have been hiding their true capabilities for decades, Mordeth continued. The merchant ships and civilian transports we see are just the surface. Underneath is a military machine designed to protect their families at any cost. Representative Zulkar demanded an immediate vote on military action against humanity, but found little support among his colleagues. The destruction of Zephyrian forces had terrified species who had viewed that military as invincible. The debate continued for hours, while Chen remained under guard near the speaking platform. She listened to alien representatives argue about how to respond to human retaliation while missing the fundamental point of the message. Finally, Chancellor Mordeth called for order and addressed the core issue that the Council needed to understand. His words would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. The question is not whether we can defeat the humans in war, he announced. The question is whether any of us would survive such a... The execution of Officer Kix Thera sent shockwaves through every alien government in the galaxy. For the first time in galactic history, a primitive species had captured and killed a Zephyrian officer. The implications terrified civilizations that had viewed humans as harmless creatures. On the Zephyrian homeworld of Zephyr Prime, the High Command called an emergency session to discuss their response. Fleet Admiral Thaxmore demanded immediate retaliation against human colonies. He wanted to show the galaxy that no one could challenge Zephyrian authority and survive. But Fleet Intelligence Director Kolvar had been studying human military capabilities since the execution broadcast. What he discovered made him question whether the Zephyrians could win a war against Earth's children. The humans had been hiding their true strength for decades. They have ships and weapons that our sensors cannot detect, Kolvar reported to the assembled commanders. The vessel that captured Kixathara appeared and vanished without triggering any of our defense networks. Their stealth technology is beyond our current understanding. The Altarian Union called for calm and negotiation, but their words carried little weight. Chancellor Mordeth had spent years studying human history and psychology. He knew that the execution was not an act of random violence, but a carefully planned message to the entire galaxy. 3 days after Kixathera's death, Chen received new intelligence that chilled her to the core. Zephyrian forces were mobilizing for a massive strike against human colonies. Admiral Thaxmore intended to make an example that would prevent future human resistance. Chen immediately contacted Admiral Thompson with the urgent warning. The Zephyrian First Fleet was moving toward the human colony of New Haven, where 50,000 civilians lived and worked. Most of them were families with children who had no military defenses. Thompson activated every human military asset in the sector while sending evacuation orders to New Haven. But the colony was 3 days away from the nearest human fleet, and the Zephyrians would arrive first. 50,000 lives hung in the balance. Colonel Morrison and her Marines were still at the mining station when they received the emergency orders. Their small force could not stop an entire Zephyrian fleet, but they could slow it down. Morrison made the decision that would define her legacy. "We are going to give those families time to escape," she announced to her soldiers. "The odds are against us, but we have something the Zephyrians do not. We are fighting for our children." The Ghostwalker and 2 other human ships took position between the Zephyrian fleet and New Haven colony. Captain West knew that his stealth vessel could not win a direct battle against capital ships, but he could use hit-and-run tactics to buy precious time. The Zephyrian First Fleet consisted of 12 heavy cruisers and 30 smaller vessels. Admiral Thaxmore commanded from the flagship Dominion and expected to destroy the human defenders within minutes. He had no idea what he was facing. West's ship struck first using quantum torpedoes that bypassed the fleet's shields and struck their engines. 2 Zephyrian cruisers lost power and drifted helplessly while their crews tried to restore propulsion. The attack came from nowhere and disappeared before return fire could be targeted. Morrison's Marines had rigged the mining station with every explosive device they could find. When the Zephyrian ships moved into range, the entire facility detonated in a massive explosion that damaged 3 more enemy vessels. The humans were fighting with suicidal courage. But the real surprise came when the Zephyrian fleet reached the edge of the New Haven system. Admiral Thompson had been planning for this moment since the first reports of systematic human abuse reached Earth. Project Death World was finally ready for deployment. 30 human warships decloaked simultaneously around the Zephyrian fleet. These were not the merchant vessels and patrol ships that aliens expected humans to possess. These were purpose-built weapons of war with technology that defied galactic understanding. The lead vessel was the battleship Retribution, under the command of Captain Lisa Stone. Her ship mounted weapons that could crack planetary crusts and armor, that could withstand direct hits from antimatter bombs. She had been waiting years for this moment. Admiral Thaxmore, you are ordered to withdraw from human space immediately, Captain Stone broadcast on all frequencies. You have 10 minutes to reverse course or face the consequences of threatening human children. Thaxmore laughed at what he viewed as a primitive bluff. Humans had been in space for less than 500 years, while Zephyrians had ruled the galaxy for millennia. No upstart species could challenge his fleet's superiority surrender. Immediately, and we will grant you quick deaths, Thaxmore responded. Resist, and we will make examples of your colonies that the galaxy will remember forever. Captain Stone's response was not transmitted in words. The Retribution's main gun fired once and erased the Zephyrian cruiser Vengeance from existence. The HFY beam weapon cut through the enemy's shields and armor like they were made of paper. The other human warships opened fire simultaneously, turning the space around New Haven into a hell of energy beams and missile explosions. Zephyrian ships that had dominated battlefields for centuries were torn apart by weapons they did not understand. Admiral Thaxmore watched in horror as his mighty fleet was systematically destroyed by primitive humans. His flagship's shields failed. Under concentrated fire and explosions rocked the bridge. He realized too late that he had underestimated his enemy. The battle lasted 18 minutes. When it ended, 11 Zephyrian heavy cruisers were destroyed along with most of their escort vessels. The flagship Dominion drifted powerless with its crew dead or dying. Only 3 enemy ships escaped to carry word back to Zephyr Prime Captain. Stone opened a channel to the surviving Zephyrian vessels as they fled the system. Her message would be recorded and transmitted to every alien government in the galaxy within hours. You came here to murder human children because we executed one of your officers for assault, Stone said coldly. Now you know the price of threatening our families. Tell your people what happened here. Tell them what humans do to those who harm our young. The news. The Ghost Walker dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Nexus Prime system, running completely silent. Captain Danny West had spent 3 days studying the resort's security patterns and knew exactly when the planetary defense grid would have gaps in its coverage. Officer Kixathera had been moved to the most exclusive section of the Grand Resort, where the galaxy's political and military elite came to relax. The Zephyrian High Command believed they had hidden her in the safest place possible, surrounded by luxury and heavy security. What they did not understand was that humans had been preparing for this moment since the first footage of Tommy Blake went viral. Every detail had been planned and every contingency accounted for. The hunt was about to become an execution. Colonel Morrison and her hand-picked team materialized in the resort service areas using military-grade teleportation technology. Sergeant Rick Harris carried enough explosives to level a city block. Corporal Amy Watson's sniper rifle could punch through armor plating at 2 kilometers. Lieutenant Carl Johnson had infiltration gear that made him nearly invisible. The Marines moved through the service tunnels, guided by maintenance worker Sam Rodriguez, who knew every passage and hidden route in the massive facility. They avoided the main security systems, while Rodriguez disabled the backup sensors along their path. Chef Noah Parker had spent weeks altering his work schedule to be in the right place at the right time. The alien guests trusted him completely as he served their meals and cleaned their suites. Tonight, he would serve them something special. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Parker had prepared the resort's signature dish with a mild paralytic agent that affected Zephyrian nervous systems but was harmless to most other species. The chemical would cause confusion and disorientation without permanent damage. As the dinner service began, Parker made sure that every Zephyrian guest received the altered meal. Within minutes, the effects became visible as the tall aliens began stumbling and calling for medical assistance. Security forces rushed to help their disabled superiors, leaving critical areas unguarded. Morrison's team used the chaos to reach Kixathera's private suite on the top floor of the resort. The officer was preparing for her own evening meal when the Marines burst through her reinforced door. She reached for her energy baton, but Johnson's stun weapon dropped her before she could activate it. Target secured, Morrison reported over the encrypted comm channel. They had captured Officer Kixathera without firing a lethal shot or harming any innocent beings. But the easy part was over. Now came the message that would echo across the galaxy. Admiral Thompson had given Morrison specific orders about how to handle the situation. This was not just about punishing one officer for her crime against a human child. This was about sending a clear signal to every alien government that humans would no longer tolerate abuse, rather than simply executing Kixathera in her suite. Morrison's team moved her to a secure location where they could broadcast what came next. The abandoned mining station in the system's asteroid belt had been prepared specifically for this purpose. Captain West transported the team and their prisoner to the mining station, while human ships took position throughout the system. The Zephyrian fleet was still hours away, and local security forces were in chaos from the paralytic incident at the resort. The mining station had been converted into a makeshift courtroom with recording equipment that could broadcast across the galaxy. Morrison stood as both prosecutor and judge, while her Marines served as bailiffs. Officer Kixathera was given a chair facing the cameras. Admiral Thompson appeared via quantum communication link to preside over the proceedings. Behind him stood representatives from every major human colony and fleet. This was not just a military tribunal, but a statement from all of humanity. Officer Kixathera, you are charged with the unprovoked assault of 8-year-old Tommy Blake, Admiral Thompson announced. You are also charged with the attempted murder of a human child and the deliberate abuse of your authority as a galactic peacekeeper. Kixathera had recovered from the stun weapon and glared at her captors with undisguised hatred. She showed no fear or remorse despite being surrounded by the soldiers who would decide her fate. In her mind, she had done nothing wrong and humans had no authority to judge her. I do not recognize this court or your primitive concept of justice, she declared. I am an officer of the Zephyrian peacekeeping force, and I acted within my lawful authority to discipline an unruly creature. Morrison stepped forward, holding a data pad with the evidence against the prisoner. The recording from Captain Martinez showed clearly that Tommy Blake had done nothing more than accidentally bump into the officer. There had been no threat or provocation. The evidence shows that you struck a human child with an energy weapon, Morrison said. The child was 8 years old and posed no threat to you or anyone else. Your own words after the assault show that you felt no remorse for nearly killing an innocent child. The broadcast went live across the galaxy as humans on every world and ship watched the proceedings. They saw Officer Kixathera sitting defiantly, while Admiral Thompson read the charges against her. They heard her dismissive attitude toward the crime she had committed. Maya Chen had ensured that the signal reached every human communication network, and many alien ones as well. Species across the galaxy watched as primitive humans conducted what appeared to be a military trial for a Zephyrian officer. You have the right to defend your actions, Admiral Thompson told the prisoner. Explain why you struck a human child. And justify your behavior to this court. Kixathera stood and faced the cameras with pride rather than shame. She believed that her people were superior to humans and that she had acted correctly in disciplining what she viewed as a poorly trained animal. The creature ran into me without looking where it was going, she said coldly. Such behavior from inferior beings cannot be tolerated, or they will become even more unruly. I administered appropriate discipline to teach it proper respect. The human audience watched in growing anger as the officer showed no understanding of what she had done. Wrong. She continued to refer to Tommy as a creature and an animal, while defending her right to strike human children whenever she felt it necessary. The so-called child should be grateful that I chose to use minimal force, Kixathera continued. My people have maintained order in this galaxy for thousands of years while yours were still living in caves. You should thank us for bringing civilization to your primitive species. Morrison felt her anger building as she listened to the officer's arrogant justification. Every word made it clear that this was not an isolated incident, but part of a systematic attitude toward humans. Kixathera viewed them as animals that needed to be trained through violence. Are you saying that you would strike other human children in similar circumstances? Morrison asked. The question was designed to reveal the full scope of the problem that humans faced in alien-controlled space. Of course, Kixathera replied without hesitation. All inferior species must learn their place in the galactic order. Your offspring are particularly undisciplined and require firm correction. Perhaps if more of them experienced proper discipline, fewer incidents would occur. The broadcast audience heard the officer threaten every human child in the galaxy. She was not sorry for what she had done to Tommy Blake. She was planning to do it again whenever the opportunity arose. Admiral Thompson exchanged looks with the other human representatives on the quantum link. They had hoped that Kixathera might show some remorse or claim that the assault was a mistake. Instead, she had revealed herself as a systematic threat to human children everywhere. The defendant has shown no remorse for her actions, Thompson announced. She has threatened to assault additional human children and has demonstrated that she views such violence as both necessary and justified. Lieutenant Johnson presented additional evidence that Maya Chen's network had gathered. Security footage from other stations showed similar incidents where Zephyrian officers had abused human civilians. The pattern of violence and discrimination was clear and extensive. This is not an isolated incident, Morrison explained to the cameras. Our investigation has revealed systematic abuse of human civilians by Zephyrian authorities throughout this sector of space. Officer Kixithara represents a threat to every human family in the galaxy. The trial continued for 2 more hours as the prosecution presented evidence of widespread anti-human discrimination. Kixithara grew more defiant with each revelation, defending every incident as necessary discipline of inferior beings. Finally, Admiral Thompson called for the verdict. The human representatives voted unanimously that Officer Kixithara was guilty of all charges. The evidence was overwhelming, and her own words had condemned her more effectively than any prosecutor could have. Officer Kixithara, you have been found guilty of unprovoked assault, attempted murder, and abuse of authority, Thompson announced. This court sentences you to death by execution. The prisoner showed no fear even as the sentence was pronounced. She believed that her people would rescue her before any humans dared to F the broadcast would reach every alien government and military comma. The recording of Tommy Blake's assault spread through human space like wildfire. Captain Martinez had sent the footage to every human news network and communication hub he could access. Within 12 hours, the video was being broadcast on every human world and ship in the galaxy. On Earth, Admiral Chris Thompson sat in his office at Human Defense Command, watching the footage for the 10th time. Each viewing made his anger burn hotter. He had served in 3 wars and seen terrible things, but watching a Zephyrian officer strike a human child filled him with a rage he had never felt before. Thompson called an emergency session of the Human Defense Council. Representatives from every major human colony and fleet joined the virtual meeting. The holographic projections showed faces filled with the same fury that Thompson felt. There was no debate about what needed to be done. That officer will face justice, Thompson declared to the assembled representatives, and any government that protects her will learn what happens when humans are pushed too far. On the frontier world of New Texas, Colonel Beth Morrison watched the footage with her battalion of Marines. These were hardened veterans who had fought in the Proxima Wars against the insectoid hive fleets. They had seen their friends die in brutal combat and thought they were prepared for anything. But watching Officer Kixithara strike Tommy Blake and then dismiss it as proper discipline broke something inside them. Sergeant Rick Harris slammed his fist into the metal wall hard enough to leave a dent. Corporal Amy Watson cleaned her rifle with mechanical precision while her jaw clenched tight with anger. "Colonel, what are our orders?" Lieutenant Carl Johnson asked. Morrison could see the barely controlled fury in her soldiers' eyes. These warriors had spent years protecting human colonies from alien threats. Seeing a human child attacked by the very aliens who claimed to keep peace made them ready for war. Morrison had been planning to retire after 30 years of military service. She had fought enough battles and lost enough friends. But as she watched Tommy Blake fall to the station floor, she knew her war was not over. "Gear up," she told her Marines. "We are going hunting." Similar scenes played out across human space. On mining colonies and research stations and trading ships, humans watched the footage and felt their carefully controlled civilizations slip away. They remembered why their ancestors had left Earth in the first place. They remembered what they were capable of when pushed too far. Dr. Helen Grant worked as a xenobiologist at the Galactic Research Institute on the neutral world of Harmony Station. She was one of the few humans who had spent years studying alien psychology and culture. When she saw the footage of Tommy's assault, she immediately understood what was about to happen. Grant sent urgent messages to every alien government she had contacts with. She tried to explain that humans were not like other species. When their children were threatened, they did not simply file complaints or seek diplomatic solutions. they became something else entirely. Her warnings were ignored or dismissed by alien officials who viewed humans as barely civilized primitives. The Zephyrian High Command laughed at her messages about human retaliation. They had the most powerful fleet in the galaxy, and humans had only been in space for a few hundred years, on the industrial world of Titan's Rest former military engineer. Frank Stone watched the footage while surrounded by his fellow miners. These were tough men and women who carved precious metals from asteroids in the most dangerous conditions imaginable. They were used to risk and hardship and violence, but they were also parents and siblings and friends of children like Tommy Blake. When they saw the Zephyrian officer's dismissive attitude after striking the boy, their industrial tools suddenly looked like weapons of war. Stone had served as a combat engineer before becoming a miner. He knew how to build things, and he knew how to destroy them. As he looked around at his fellow workers, he saw the same cold determination that had once turned the tide at the Battle of Wolf 359. "Time to organize some justice expeditions," Stone announced. Within hours, similar groups were forming on dozens of human worlds. Former soldiers and current civilians united by a single goal: find Officer Kix Thera. The search began immediately. Humans had been quietly building an intelligence network for decades as they expanded into galaxy dominated by older alien civilizations. Information broker Maya Chen operated from a hidden base in the asteroid belt using the code name Blackbird. Chen had contacts in every major spaceport and trade hub. She dealt in secrets and information that alien governments thought were safely hidden. When the human underground put out the call for Kix Thera's location, Chen activated every asset she had. The Zephyrian officer had been quietly transferred from Kepler Station to avoid further incidents. Her superiors believed they had hidden her safely on the pleasure world of Nexus Prime, where the galaxy's elite went to relax and enjoy themselves. What they did not realize was that humans worked everywhere in the galaxy. They served as cooks and cleaners and maintenance workers in places where aliens felt completely safe. These humans had learned to be invisible to their alien employers while seeing and hearing everything. Chef Noah Parker had worked in the kitchens of the Grand Resort on Nexus Prime for 3 years. The alien guests barely noticed him as he prepared their meals and cleaned their plates. But Parker noticed everything about them, including which ones were wanted by his own people maintenance. Worker Sam Rodriguez moved through the resort's service tunnels like a ghost. He repaired environmental systems and communication networks while mapping every room and corridor. The resort's security was designed to keep unwanted visitors out, but not to watch the staff who worked there every day within 48 hours. Of Tommy Blake's assault, Maya Chen had Officer Kix Thera's exact location, daily schedule, and security arrangements. The information was passed up through the human underground until it reached the people who could act on it. Colonel Morrison received the intelligence package while her Marines were preparing their equipment. The data was incredibly detailed, showing not just where Kix Thera was staying, but her habits and preferences, and the layout of her private suite. "How did we get intel this good?" Sergeant Harris asked as he studied the resort blueprints. Morrison smiled grimly as she realized the scope of the human intelligence network. They had people everywhere, and those people were ready to help when their children were threatened. Captain Danny West commanded the stealth reconnaissance ship Ghostwalker. His vessel was designed to slip past alien sensors and gather intelligence on potential threats. When the order came to locate and track, Officer Kix Thera West felt a grim satisfaction. The Ghostwalker had been built in secret shipyards, using technology that officially did not exist. Humans had learned that in a galaxy full of older civilizations, survival sometimes required capabilities that others did not expect. West's ship jumped to the Nexus Prime system and began passive surveillance of the resort. Advanced sensors tracked Kixthara's movements while recording everything about the facility's defenses. The officer followed a predictable routine that would make the extraction simple. Back on Earth, Admiral Thompson coordinated the growing operation. Intelligence flowed in from across the galaxy as humans in every profession provided whatever help they could. The scope of the response surprised even Thompson, who had spent his career underestimating his own species. Military units prepared for deployment, while civilian volunteers organized support networks. Ships that had never carried weapons were quietly armed. Trading vessels became troop transports. Scientific expeditions turned into reconnaissance missions. The aliens had made a critical error in judgment. They viewed humans as weak creatures who would complain and protest, but ultimately accept whatever treatment they received. They had no understanding of human pack bonding or protective instincts. Dr. Grant continued trying to warn alien governments about what was coming. She sent detailed psychological profiles explaining human behavior patterns when their young were threatened. She described historical examples of human retaliation that had shaped their entire civilization. Her warnings fell on deaf ears. Alien officials could not believe that primitive humans would dare to challenge established galactic powers. The Zephyrian High Command increased security around their facilities, but dismissed the idea of serious human retaliation on Kepler Station. Tommy Blake remained in his coma while his family maintained their vigil. Dr. Wright worked around the clock trying to repair the damage to his brain, but the boy's condition remained critical. His parents, Jake and Lisa, alternated between grief and rage as they watched their son fight for life. Commander Veltar had filed his official report claiming that the incident was an unfortunate accident during routine peacekeeping operations. He recommended no disciplinary action against Officer Kixthara and suggested that humans needed better supervision of their offspring. The commander had no idea that his dismissive report was being read by human intelligence operatives. Every word was analyzed and recorded as evidence of the systematic discrimination that humans faced in alien-controlled space. As the hours passed, more humans learned about Tommy Blake and Officer Kixthara. The story spread beyond official channels as ordinary. Tommy Blake ran through the wide halls of Kepler Station with his sister Katie close behind him. The 8-year-old boy laughed as he dodged between the tall alien beings who walked through the trading hub. His parents, Jake and Lisa Blake, were busy with their merchant work in the main trading center and had told the children they could play in the safe civilian areas. The station buzzed with activity as beings from dozens of different worlds bought and sold goods. Tommy had never seen so many different aliens in one place. There were tall blue creatures with 4 arms, short, furry beings that rolled instead of walked, and many others that looked nothing like humans. Katie grabbed his hand as they stopped to watch a group of crystalline beings that seemed to sing to each other instead of speaking. "Tommy, look at that one," Katie whispered and pointed at a creature that looked like a walking tree. The boy stared in wonder at all the strange sights around them. This was only their second time away from Earth, and everything still seemed magical to them. The children continued their exploration when Tommy spotted something that made his eyes go wide. Near one of the food stalls was a small alien child about his own size. The creature had green skin and large eyes and was playing with what looked like a floating ball of light. Tommy had never seen another child on the station. Without thinking, Tommy ran toward the alien child, wanting to see the amazing toy up close. Katie called after him, but he was already moving fast between the crowds of adults. He watched the floating, light as he ran and did not see the tall figure stepping out from behind a support beam. Tommy crashed right into the legs of Officer Kix Thera of the Zephyrian peacekeeping force. The collision knocked the small human boy backward onto the metal floor of the station. The officer stood over 2 meters tall with pale purple skin and wore the dark uniform that marked her as one of the galaxy's law enforcement elite officer, Kix Thara, looked down at the small human with disgust. Her people, the Zephyrians, had been the dominant military power in this sector for thousands of years. They viewed most other species as inferior, but humans were considered especially primitive. The fact that this small creature had dared to touch her uniform filled her with rage. "Filthy little beast," she said in accented but clear human language. Tommy looked up at her with confusion, not understanding why the tall alien was so angry. He started to stand up and opened his mouth to say sorry when Kix Thera's hand moved to the energy baton on her belt. Katie reached her brother and helped pull him to his feet. She could see the anger in the alien officer's eyes and tried to move Tommy away from danger, but Kix Thera stepped forward, blocking their path. Several other beings in the area noticed what was happening, but most quickly looked away and continued walking. "You will learn proper respect for your betters," Kix Thera said as she activated her energy baton. The weapon hummed with power and glowed with blue light. Tommy's eyes went wide with fear as he realized he was in real danger. He had bumped into adults before, and they had never reacted like this. Captain Roy Martinez of the human merchant vessel New Horizon was buying supplies at a nearby stall when he heard the commotion. He turned to see the Zephyrian officer standing over 2 human children with her weapon drawn. Martinez had served in the human military before becoming a trader, and his instincts kicked in immediately. He started moving toward the children while reaching for his personal recording device. Martinez had heard stories of Zephyrian officers abusing humans in the outer systems, but had never witnessed it himself. He knew that if something happened, he would need proof. "Please, we are sorry," Katie said as she tried to shield her younger brother. She was only 10 years old, but already understood that adults could be dangerous when they were angry. Tommy hid behind his sister, still not fully understanding what was happening. Kix Thera raised the energy baton high above her head. In her mind, she was teaching these primitive creatures an important lesson about respecting superior beings. The fact that they were children made no difference to her. Young animals needed to be trained properly, or they would cause problems when they grew up. The energy baton came down hard across Tommy's small body. The weapon was designed to subdue adult criminals, and the power setting was far too high for a human child. Tommy screamed as electricity coursed through him and he collapsed to the floor convulsing. Katie screamed and dropped to her knees beside her brother. Tommy's eyes rolled back and his small body shook uncontrollably before going completely still. Blood ran from his nose and ears as his brain struggled with the massive electrical trauma. Captain Martinez reached them just as Tommy went limp. He knelt beside the children and checked the boy's pulse. It was weak and irregular, and Martinez could see that the child was badly hurt. He looked up at Officer Kix Thera with pure hatred in his eyes. "You struck a child," Martinez said as he held Tommy's still form. The boy was breathing, but barely, and Martinez knew they needed medical help immediately. He activated his comm device to call for emergency medical response. While keeping his recording device running, Officer Kix Thera showed no sign of regret or concern. She deactivated her energy baton and returned it to her belt as if nothing important had happened. In her experience, humans were weak creatures that recovered quickly from minor discipline. She did not understand that their biology was different from the hardier species she usually dealt with. The creature should have watched where it was going, she said coldly. Perhaps this lesson will teach it better manners in the future station. Medical personnel arrived quickly and began working on Tommy. The human medic, Dr. Susan Wright, took one look at the boy's condition and knew it was serious. The electrical discharge had caused significant neurological damage, and Tommy had slipped into a deep coma as they prepared to move Tommy to the medical bay. Captain Martinez continued recording everything. He captured Kixathera's dismissive attitude and her complete lack of concern for the injured child. He also recorded the reactions of the other aliens in the area who seemed to view the incident as normal. Katie rode with her unconscious brother to the medical center while Martinez went to find Jake and Lisa Blake. When he told them what had happened, Lisa collapsed in shock and Jake's face went white with rage. They rushed to the medical bay where Dr. Wright gave them the devastating news. Tommy's brain had been severely damaged by the electrical shock. The boy might never wake up, and even if he did, he would likely suffer permanent disabilities. The station's medical equipment was advanced, but not advanced enough to fully repair the damage that had been done. Jake Blake demanded to speak with station security about pressing charges against Officer Kixathera. He was directed to Commander Veltar, who was also a Zephyrian and Kixathera's direct superior. The commander listened to Blake's complaint with obvious boredom. Officer Kixathera was performing her lawful duties in maintaining order on this station, Commander Veltar said without emotion. If your offspring had been properly supervised, this unfortunate accident would not have occurred. Jake could not believe what he was hearing. His son was lying in a coma, and the station commander was calling it an accident. He demanded to see the security footage of the incident, but was told that the cameras in that section had mysteriously malfunctioned. Captain Martinez stepped forward and showed Commander Veltar the recording he had made with his personal device. The footage clearly showed Officer Kixathera striking Tommy without provocation and showed her callous reaction afterward. Martinez demanded that charges be filed immediately. Commander Veltar barely glanced at the recording before dismissing it. He claimed that the footage was unclear and could have been altered. He also pointed out that station law gave Zephyrian officers broad authority to maintain order, using whatever force they deemed necessary. Perhaps in the future you will teach your young to show proper respect for their betters, the commander said as he prepared to leave. This matter is closed. Jake Blake stood in shock as the alien commander walked away. His son was fighting for his life, and the people responsible were calling it justified discipline. He looked at his wife Lisa, who was crying silently, and at Katie, who was trying to be brave for her parents. Captain Martinez put a hand on Jake's shoulder and showed him the recording device. The footage was crystal clear and showed exactly what had happened. Martinez promised that every human in the galaxy would see what had been done to Tommy Blake. As night fell on Kepler Station, Tommy lay unconscious in the medical bay, surrounded by machines that kept him alive. His family stayed by his bedside, hoping he would wake up. But in the depths of space, Captain Martinez was already uploading the footage to the human communication networks. Within hours, the recording would spread across every human colony and ship. And when humans saw what had been done to one of their children, the galaxy would learn why Earth was called a death world.